We know it happens every single year. NFL fans, the NFL media, draft media in particular, love to talk about the thought of certain teams needing to trade down, certain teams needing to accumulate additional picks. You've got holes all over the place on the roster. So you need to have as many shots as possible to get it right. You need as many picks as possible because you've got to address depth concerns in many different areas. And in particular, what you see in playing out in the lead up to this 2016 NFL draft, where you've seen the Titans peel back from 1 to 15 and the Rams going up to 1, and the Browns moving back from 2 to 8, and the Eagles moving up to 2. There's a lot of debate about what's the better philosophy. Is the better philosophy to trade down? Is the better philosophy to trade up? Well, everybody kind of has their opinion on this. I have my opinion on it too. But I wanted to take a step back from my own opinion and see if my opinion would change, or I would formulate a slightly different or more refined opinion by looking back at the recent history of the NFL draft and see if teams that have traded down big in the first round or traded up big in the first round have come out better for it, which philosophy is better, if there really is a difference, if it really does freaking matter all of that much. So that's what I've set out to do. This video is going to be talking about the history of trading down and whether or not it makes sense or whether or not it works. And the next video will be about trading up and whether or not that makes sense and whether or not that works out for teams. Now, I get it from a fan and media standpoint why people are in love with the concept of trading down. It's about getting a quantity of picks over necessarily sheer quality, because even if you got a star or two out of the draft, if you've got holes all over the place, is it really going to matter that much? That's a valid point. You need draft pick currency. They're a precious commodity in today's game where more than ever you're building championship teams through the draft. If you're smart, by and large, you have to do it. You need as many shots in the chamber as possible. You need as many chances at picks as you possibly can get. And in part two, getting that additional draft pick currency from trading down would, in theory, provide you a lot more draft flexibility. You've already traded down once. Who's to say you wouldn't trade down again and get with another team that wants to move, maybe not as far, but you could still get more picks. You could potentially be setting yourself up to move up at different periods of time, maybe trade back up into round 1 to get a second, first round pick, maybe provide you flexibility to move up in the second, third, fourth round if you need to, potentially also giving you some flexibility in upcoming years NFL drafts and strengthening your overall position there. So I get it, but does it really matter, and does it make sense, and does it ultimately bear out that this is a good decision, a good draft strategy? So I wanted to take a look back at the past decade or so, and I'm focusing on the first round, and I'm focusing on some of the biggest and most notable trade backs that we've seen in recent years, not the ones where somebody moved back 1 pick or 2 picks, because that really doesn't require, by and large, a lot to give up. It doesn't get a lot in return. I'm focusing on the bigger name, bigger deals. And, I've got to be honest, I thought the results were somewhat interesting, and if anything, leave as many questions as answers. Because there are examples where trading back does work for a team. I look at 2007, and while a lot of people focus on the Jets getting Darrelle Revis when they moved up from, I think it was 25 to 14, and talk about how good of a pick that was for them, and it was probably worth the price. But at the same token, the team that they traded up with was the Carolina Panthers, who peeled back to 25, got a second-round pick from the Jets, and turned those 2 picks into John Beeson and Ryan Khalil. So at the end of the day, who got the better of that deal? You could make the argument that both teams came out well, but when you look at it, Khalil is a Pro Bowl, borderline all-pro center, and Beeson was a good player for a number of years. Darrelle Revis is one of the best corners in the league, yes, at a premium position, mind you. But the Panthers were able to get 2 starters, and 2 quality starters at that, where the Jets just got 1. So who wins? Then you look at 2008, the Baltimore Ravens peeling back from 8 to 26, where the Jaguars were. Let the Jaguars screw up there. The Ravens got additional draft pick currency, and it provided them with some flexibility. They ended up sitting there and trading up from 26 to 18. They got Joe Flacco. Then in round 2, they took the second-round pick they got from the Jaguars and turned that into Ray Rice. So you would have to sit there and say that was a nice haul for them, and that was a productive trade down. But then you'll see other times where you could say, hey, this trade down worked, but did they really need to, or should they really have bothered? And I look, for example, at the 2011 Washington Redskins. They were sitting at pick 10. The Jaguars came calling because they got hard-ons for Blaine Gabbert, so they went from 10 to 16. Okay. They picked Ryan Kerrigan. Not bad. They got additional picks. That's good. But at the end of the day, though, if you're the Washington Redskins, yes, it was nice to get additional picks, and you still got a Pro Bowl caliber player in Ryan Kerrigan. But think about it. At pick 10, who could they have selected in that 2011 draft? His name was J.J. Watt. And yes, we didn't envision him to be arguably the best defensive player in the National Football League 5 years ago with his draft class. That wasn't the upside for him. That wasn't the thought of how good or great he could be. But it's what he turned out to be. So for the Redskins, we could talk about picking up additional draft pick currency until you're blue in the damn face. And it sounds great in theory, but again, they passed up on J.J. Watt to move back to take Ryan Kerrigan. Kerrigan is a nice player. He is a Pro Bowler. But do those extra picks matter when you could have gotten a once-in-a-generation Hall of Famer like J.J. Watt? I don't think so. Sometimes the trade down, kind of works out, but does it really matter? I look at the 2010 Miami Dolphins. The Chargers had the hard out for Ryan Matthews. They peeled up from 28-12. The Dolphins moved back. They got Jared Odrick at 28, which was a better pick for them than what the Chargers got out of Matthews at 12. And the second-round pick they got out of the deal, they took Koamisi. It is what it is there. With the additional picks that they got, it provided them the flexibility to trade off their 2010, 2011 second-rounders to go get Brandon Marshall. So it did provide them some flexibility, but Odrick's no longer with the team. Misi never really became a big-time player. Brandon Marshall spent 2 years there, and then they traded him off for a couple of third-round picks to Chicago. So they took 2 second-round picks and turned them into years later 2 third-round picks, only got 2 years of production out of Brandon Marshall. Did it really matter? At the end of the day, I don't know necessarily that it did. Now, a lot of people like to point to a deal like, let's say, the 2012 St. Louis Rams, and people fall in love with the concept of the Rams trolling the Redskins, trotting out all those players that they got from the RG&E deal and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. When you really truly look at this, does it really matter? Because first and foremost, as I've referenced before, in that 4-year stretch since the 2012 draft, we've had 4 seasons. The Redskins have made the playoffs twice, with RG3 as a starter in his rookie year in 2012, and then this year with Kirk Cousins, who was taken in the 4th round of that year's draft. When you look at the Rams, they've made the playoffs exactly 0 times. So everybody wants to talk about all this bounty of picks and all of this and all this other crap, but at the end of the day, it didn't matter. Part of the problem for them was that they didn't have the quarterback in place. So that's problem number 1. 4 years later, now they have to peel up to go get that guy, to go get their guy. So all these moves you make, and even when you look at it, they traded from 2 to 6. Then the Cowboys came calling and wanted Morris Claiborne, so they traded back from 6 to 14, picked up an additional second round. But when you look overall at who the Rams got as a direct result of the original RG3 deal in terms of draft picks and the other subsequent trades, it was Michael Brockers instead of Fletcher Cox, who I think would have been the much better fit for them, but they traded back too far, frankly. Janoris Jenkins, who's no longer with the team. Isaiah P., no longer with the team. Rokavius Watkins, who the fuck cares? Alec Ogletree, Stedman Bailey, Sack Stacy, Greg Robinson. That's not exactly a Herschel Walker-esque type of haul. This is not exactly something that you're going to write home about and talk about the genius of the drafting of Les Snead and Jeff Fisher. When you look at the 2012 draft, would they have just been better suited, staying their asses put at number 6 and taking Fletcher Cox? Sure, they wouldn't have gotten all these additional draft picks and so on and so forth. But when you really truly look at it, did it matter? Like, instead of trading up from 16 to 8 in 2013 to go get Tavon Austin, maybe just stay your asses put at pick 16. You could still take Alec Ogletree, or maybe you take somebody like, I don't know, a DeAndre Hopkins. In terms of 2014, yes, it's great that they got that number 2 overall pick, but they took Greg Robinson when you had guys like Khalil Mack on the board and Watkins and Evans and Beckham Jr. and Aaron Donald, who they ended up getting at 13. Well, they still got that stud Aaron Donald at 13 anyways. If anything, he should have been the pick at number 2, frankly. So, when we'll look at this, part of it's execution, part of it's philosophy, but part of it, if you didn't have the quarterback, it didn't fucking matter. I look at another deal down, the Oakland Raiders in 2013. This is an example of where it didn't work out for either party involved. The Raiders peel back from 3 to 12. They had to get back a second-round pick that they lost from the stupid-ass Carson Palmer deal. So the Dolphins move up from 12 to 3, give them the second round pick they were seeking. The Raiders turn it into DJ Hayden and Menelik Watson. And the Dolphins turn the third overall pick into Deion Jordan. Did anybody really win there? Did that extra pick they accumulate for the Raiders really make much of a difference? Does it really matter at the end of the day? It's a fair question. Now I think you get to the point, though, where people will start to say, well, it's about the execution, and it's about the execution. It's about who you pick and about all of this. Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Sometimes when you're in a position to potentially pick an elite talent, you stay there. Sometimes you need impact players. You are more likely to find those impact players, in theory, picking in the top 5 or top 10 as opposed to peeling back into the mid to late teens or the 20s and trying to find the guys there. They can be found there. Impact players, in theory, can be found anywhere in the draft. But the first-round talents are the first-round talents for the reason. They're supposed to be the guys that are most likely to become those guys. So when I hear people say automatically that trading down makes sense, not necessarily. And I present to you the Cleveland Browns as a perfect example. I cannot believe for the life of me that we have so many knucklehead fans and so many knuckleheads in the NFL and draft media that try to sit there and suggest that this is a new day for the Cleveland Browns, that this is something different or something out of the norm, something, as Dan Wetzel put it, un-Browns. And so many other people are praising this move and talking about the greatness of this move, peeling back from 2 to 8 and all the draft picks that they got, how wonderful. They're no longer the skid marks, and Cleveland no longer smells like shit when you roll into downtown and you have to stay there for a couple hours at the freaking Greyhound bus station. I can assure you that ain't true. That city's still going to smell like shit. And the Cleveland Browns are still the fucking skid marks. If any organization should have learned their lesson by now, that trading back isn't the way to go, it's the Cleveland Browns. When somebody sits there and says this is an un-Brown thing to do, I say, ding dong, dumb dicks, this is the epitome of the Cleveland Browns thing to do because they've done it 3 other times since 2009. The lack of research, the lack of people knowing their draft history, to me, is appalling. And people want to come at me and debate and argue these points or sit there and put out their own pointless fucking propaganda. How in the hell can you not just take a look back into recent history and see its history repeating itself again? It's the same talking points. It's a new regime. They have needs everywhere. So they get quantity over quality. They get draft pick currency. They're going to be power players. It gives them all types of draft flexibility and all this other bullshit. It's the same thing we said about them in 2009 when they traded back big. It's the same thing we said about them in 2011 when they traded back big. It's the same thing we said about them in 2014 when they traded back big. Let's look at 09, 11, and 14. Because each of them prove a kind of a different example of why trading down may not actually matter. The 09 Cleveland Browns traded back from 5 to 17. The Jets moved up to get Mark Sanchez, so Cleveland decided that they were going to move back to 17. They wanted some additional players. They wanted some additional draft picks. Then they peeled back from 17 to 19, 19 to 21, and they came out of the draft with Alex Mack. So they got a good player there. But 09's draft wasn't a particularly good one. Look at some of the additional picks that they acquired from that. You got David Vacoon, Coy Francis, what was it? James Davis, I think, was the other one. And then they got some other players like Kenyon Coleman and Brett Ratliff and Abram Elam. I mean, you're peeling back that far and you're including veteran second and third tier players in the deal. When you look back at this deal, you can talk about execution, you can talk about many things, but this just seemed kind of pointless. If you loved Alex Mack that much, you might as well have just taken him at fucking 5th overall. Yes, people are going to lambaste you, and people are going to blast you to kingdom freaking come, but at least you would have gotten a top 5 pick right in a sense because the guy would have actually panned out for you. And you could sit there and talking about moving back and everything else. Again, it's the Cleveland Browns. They're picking in the top 5 for a reason, so they already have established over the years that they're not very good at this draft thing. Giving them more chances at this is no guarantee of any goddamn thing. And even when you start getting into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round, people like to talk about the sleepers you find and the guys that outplay their draft position. And those guys happen in every draft. But there are so many of those guys that are out of the damn league in 2, 3, or 4 years. So does it really matter? Do you want to trade back and get into a position where you get all the picks in those rounds, where 70 to 80% of the players taken won't be NFL starters, and half of them, if not more, will be out of the league in 3 years? Is that the talent pool that you want to draw out of? I don't know. Then you look at the 2011 draft, and they peeled back from 6 to 27. Got themselves a first-round pick in 2012, got themselves a second-round pick in 2011, got themselves something else. The Falcons went up and got Julio Jones. The Browns sat there and then later peeled up from 27 to 21 because of some of the flexibility they had to get Phil Taylor. Oh, boy. And then the second-round pick, they took Greg Little. Oh, boy. The fourth-round pick, they took Owen Maricic. Oh, boy. And then the first-round pick in 2012 that they got from this deal in 2011, they used on Brandon Weeden. So from a fundamental trade standpoint, they took Julio Jones and traded him from Phil Taylor, Brandon Weeden, Greg Little, and Owen Maricic. Oopsie daisies. And this, to me, is a particular example of you can fall in love with the concept of trading back. You can fall in love with the thought process of getting additional picks. But again, if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, it's not matter. And even if you did execute, and let's say the Browns got 4 solid contributors here. Maybe no stars, but they got solid contributors. Would you rather have 4 solid contributors or 1 potential future Hall of Famer in Julio Jones? To me, you take that elite talent because it's hard to find elite talent, and you can only get so many of those guys every year. And in particular, when you look at the Browns, and 5 years later, people are still harping and bitching about the fact that they have a huge gaping void at wide receiver because when they do get somebody to develop like Travis Benjamin, they just let him walk in free agency, or you get Josh Gordon who can't put down the fucking peace pipe and pass a piss test to save his mother humping life. Just take Julio Jones. Why trade down and get cutesy and do all this other shit? You had to know in that draft that A.J. Green was going to be a stud. Julio Jones is going to be a stud. You were there at pick 6. You've got a chance at Julio Jones. He's going to be a stud. Everybody knows this. Clearly established. And the Browns going to Browns, period. But then we get to the creme de la crap of all of this, which is 2014. They trade back from 4 to 9. They get a first and fourth round pick in 2015 out of the deal. So we're talking about power position, new regime, Pettine and Farmer know what the fuck they're doing until the actual draft picks happen. And then we find out clearly, of course, that they have no fucking clue. Instead of peeling back to number 9 and taking the best wide receiver on the board at that time, which would have clearly been Odell Beckham Jr., or even sitting there and taking somebody like, I don't know, an Aaron Donald. Hell, even, if you want to get that to that point, you want to say a Taylor Lewan, doesn't really fucking matter. Instead of taking a guy like that, they trade up from 9 to 8 to get Justin Gilbert. They could have just traded up from 9 to 8 and gotten Anthony Barr. Justin Gilbert. And then that first round pick that they got for 2015, they used on Cameron Erving. Well, let me ask you this. If you're a Browns fan, would you rather have had the additional picks again and have this organization screw them up again, trading out of the possibility to get an elite talent again, or still having the opportunity to get an elite talent again and missing out on them again? Or would you rather them just fucking stay put, stop playing cutesy footsie, and fucking man up and pick a star, pick a superstar? But you look at this. If they stay put in 2014, fucking Khalil Mack is on the board. You still have Sammy Watkins on the board. You have Mike Evans on the goddamn board. You have Aaron Donald on the goddamn board. And they trade back and get Justin Gilbert. How stupid can you fucking be? Khalil Mack coming into this draft was arguably the number 1 player on the board. Watkins, many thought, was a top 5 talent. Evans, Beckham, top 10 talents. Aaron Donald, to me, top 5 talent. And you passed on all them fucks to take Justin Gilbert to accumulate additional picks that at the end of the day don't fucking matter. Again, if you're in a position to get into elite talent, which the Browns clearly were in 2011 and 2014, you take them. Period. Point blank. End of discussion. Oh, but end of discussion. Because the skid marks have fucking proven this point as much as anything else. When you are in a position to get elite talent, when you have a draft where certain guys are viewed as elite talents, you stay put if you got an option to take one, and you fucking take one. Period. 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 Like, I'll go back. Let's go back to 1998. And we know I'm not the hugest Peyton Manning fan. But let me ask you this. Because I know what my answer would be. If you've got the number 1 overall pick and you're the Indianapolis Colts, and a team comes calling, offering you every single pick in the 1998 draft and the first and third round pick in 1999, are you going to trade down and lose out on Peyton Manning? Fuck no! Because all of these other picks aren't going to matter. You don't pass up on the future clear-cut first ballot Hall of Famer to address depth on multiple positions on your motherfucking roster. What dumbass would do that? Seriously. And I find it interesting, the narrative about this over the years and just the history about it even going further back beyond 10 years, because it's kind of a mixed bag. I got to look at the 99 draft. The whole Ricky Williams deal. The Saints wanted to get up from 12 to 5, and the Bears got involved, the Redskins got involved, and eventually it happened. They got their Ricky Williams. And the Redskins traded back from 5 to 7, and they took Champ Bailey. Then the pick that they got from the Saints, it ended up being number 2 overall. The following year, they turned into LeVar Arrington. You know, Bailey's going to the Hall of Fame someday. Arrington isn't. But Arrington had his moment in the sun. But you look at Champ Bailey, couldn't they just stay put at number 5 and taken him? And as far as the LeVar Arrington thing, yeah, it was great that they got him, but they passed up on Brian Urlacher! So it didn't fucking matter at the end of the day. And especially when you look at it from a Redskins standpoint, they only had Bailey a few years and he was gone any damn ways. You know, did it really matter? Yes, they had positioned themselves well in theory. In this case, it comes down to execution. Now I look at another notable example to me that actually worked out very well. The San Diego Chargers in 2001. They've got the number 1 overall pick. The Falcons got it hard and deep and fast for Michael Vick. So the Chargers trade back, get the superior player on the board, going way back in my opinion, in LaDainian Tomlinson, and still can get Drew Brees later on with their own second-round pick. You know, when you look at that, even if it was straight up LaDainian Tomlinson for Michael Vick, you're doing the LT portion every fucking single day of the week. So that trade worked out brilliantly for the San Diego Chargers. You know, you look at 2004, an example of where it worked out for both sides. The Chargers take Eli Manning at number 1. The Giants take Phillip Rivers at number 4. You swap. You know, the Giants most certainly haven't looked back. Yeah, they gave up a first-round pick in 2005 that the Chargers turned into Sean Merriman, and that's all fine and good. And Merriman had a good run, and Rivers has had a great run. You know, but the Giants have won 2 Super Bowls. You know, it was a deal that worked out for both parties. But I look back at 1997 and talk about narratives being set. The New York Jets in that draft had the number 1 overall pick on the heels of, I think it was a 1-15 season in Keyshawn's rookie year in 96. So you're sitting there, got the number 1 overall pick. There's no quarterback worth taking there. It was viewed to be a weaker draft. So as a result, the Jets traded back from 1 to 6 and then again from 6 to 8. And people want to praise it. And people will talk about it still and talk about how it was a deal that helped the Jets get to the AFC Championship game a couple of years later, and it's very true. What was it, 1998 or so? They got to the AFC Championship game with, I think, Glenn Foley as the starting quarterback. My history could be wrong, but I'm pretty confident it may be right here. So, in theory, it seems like it worked. They got James Ferrier, But let's look at what they did in 97. Who ended up going number 1 overall? Well, the St. Louis Rams traded up at that time from 6 to 1, and they went and got Orlando Pace, who is what? In the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And while people want to praise the Jets and talk about this and the brilliance of Parcells and trading down and all this other hot garbage, at the end of the day, how many Super Bowls have the Jets been to since that 97? Exactly. The Rams have been to 2 Super Bowls with Orlando Pace as their starting left tackle and won a Super Bowl in the 99 season. So you would argue in part at the end of the day, by year 3 with Pace, they had won a Super Bowl. You could say, well, that's not just because of Pace. It's about all these other factors. But Orlando Pace was a franchise left tackle. I mean, the brother has something to do with it. You get what I'm saying? And then you look at the fact that Jets were still sitting there at 6. They traded back to 8 to get James Ferrier. Why is that significant? Because at pick 6, who could they have gotten? They could have gotten Walter Jones, who is now what? In the Pro Football Hall of Fame, who was a part of a Seahawks team that went to the Super Bowl in the 2005 season. So people will look back and talk about how the Jets mastered that draft or they did this great, wonderful thing. At the end of the day, did they really? And even when you go back and look at the Jets like in 2000, based off of different things that happened, they had 4 first-round picks. Again, just because you have a quantity of picks doesn't mean that they work out for you and make a big difference. Yeah, they took guys like Pennington Abraham and Ellis, and they were good, solid players. But then you take Anthony Beck. You know what I mean? It's just, I guess my whole point I'm trying to get to here is extra picks alone are nice, but they're not a guarantee of anything. And oftentimes, they don't work out. A lot of times we also forget about all these teams that trade out of the top 3, top 5, top 10. These are bad teams that historically make bad draft choices. Why? In large part, they are in the draft position that they're trying to move back from. So why would we assume in any way whatsoever, shape, or form that this team who screwed up for years in the draft is all of a sudden going to magically figure it out with this opportunity? Just because you got more picks doesn't mean any goddamn thing. Especially when it's a bad team. And I point to the Cleveland Browns, and not just pick on them because there's other teams and examples as well that I've talked about here. But when you're the Cleveland Browns, and the regimes may have changed, but the approach is always the same and the decisions are the same, the true definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing over and over again, getting the same result and wondering why. For the 4th time since 2009, the Browns are doing the same thing. You could talk about the execution of the picks all the hell you damn want to, but at some point in time, there's a philosophical problem with this. And I think part of the problem sometimes that can come from these massive trade downs is that when you're picking, like, let's say where the Titans were at number 1 or the Browns were at number 2, your initial preparation, your months of preparation from the end of the regular season until maybe March or the beginning of April is with the mindset that you're going to be picking number 1 overall or number 2 overall or in the top 5. So you gear your draft board in part as a result. Your whole strategy is set up that way with that mindset of where you're picking. And therefore, you are focusing on this certain pool of players. And you are, no matter what any team's going to say. If I'm picking 5, why the hell would I be focusing on a guy that I'm going to think will go in the 15 to 25 range? I'm just not going to. I'll focus on him some with the hope that he would drop to the beginning portion of round 2, but I'm not going to focus on him as much as I'm going to focus on the guys that I'll potentially take at pick 1, pick 2, pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, pick 6. You get the point. So now you've spent months preparing a draft philosophy and a draft strategy off of one reality, and then all of a sudden at the 11th hour or at the last minute, you shake it up. It affects the entire approach of the draft, and I think that's why so many times we see these big, massive trade downs ultimately not work, in particular with organizations that don't know what the hell they're doing because they're not able to adjust on the fly. They didn't properly prepare themselves for the position that they were putting themselves in, and that's just a fact. And you look back on the history, that's clearly the case. I also make the argument that when you are in a position to take elite talent, you don't pass up on elite talent no matter what the bounty or volume of picks. I look at the Tennessee Titans and I look at the Cleveland Browns this year. Even if both teams decided they didn't want to take a quarterback in this draft, I'm fine with that because there are elite talents on the board. Tennessee already has their quarterback in Marcus Mariota. In part, it makes a little more sense for them to trade down. It makes them more likely to figure it out and get it to work because they've already got that dude. Whereas the Cleveland Browns still don't have that guy, so they went the St. Louis Rams approach of 4 years later. We're going to talk about all these picks that they got, which really weren't all that great, and then they're still looking for a fucking quarterback anyways. But when you look at the Titans and the Browns, you're in a position to get guys like Tunsil, get guys like Ramsey, Miles Jack, DeForest Buckner, maybe like you said, Carson Wentz, Ezekiel Elliott, and you trade out of that position. And if you're the Titans, you trade all the way back just to sit there and maybe have to trade back up to get a guy that you actually wanted in the top 10. And the Browns are going to sit there and probably want to deal back or waste their pick on 8 on somebody that's the wrong fit for them when you could have just taken the elite talent. How much better would the Browns look right now if they would have basically had the Raiders draft for all intents and purposes, if you think about it, in 2014? How much better would the Browns look if they would have taken Khalil Mack and Derek Carr as opposed to the Raiders? They were in a position, I believe, to do both, and they did neither because of the Browns, and that's what dumbass organizations do at the end of the day, and that's the truth of the matter. You don't pass up on Julio Jones because you want to get Phil Taylor and Brandon Weeden and a bunch of other fucks. You just don't do that. And even if you think you could still get a quality Pro Bowl player, if a guy that you could have taken and were in position to originally take turns out to be the best defensive player potentially of his generation and a future first ballot Hall of Famer like J.J. Watt, how much are you really going to praise the Washington Redskins? I get the whole point again that it provides versatility and flexibility, but in the end of the day, does it really matter? If anything, I would be a stronger advocate for maybe trading down 1 to 3 picks, and typically in the middle of round number 1. Even the teams sometimes that peel out of round 1 to go back into round 2, those deals don't always work out for them and don't work out all that well. This whole notion again of just getting additional picks. You can get additional picks until you're blue in the fucking face. But if they aren't right and you don't make the right decisions, it doesn't matter. But sometimes, even if you do make good picks, you passed up on better players by getting too cute, moving too far back. And other times you move too far back, so you get out of a position where you could have taken an elite talent, where if you would have just stayed put, you could have gotten an elite talent and decreased your chance of producing a first-round bust. It's that simple. So trading down can work. But I think all this praise for teams like the Titans and Browns that make these big, massive moves down the board needs to cool off a little bit. People need to pump the brakes on this shit. Because we can talk about trading down. You got to find the right trade partner. You got to find the composition package that makes sense. But sometimes, if you just like a player that much, just take them. Don't get cute. Don't overthink it. Just take them. So, in future years, am I going to sit there and automatically praise these teams that make these big moves down the board? No. Because for a variety of different reasons, I just don't necessarily agree that it's the correct approach to take with the NFL draft.